I'm making an updated Pendulum Edition deck profile for the new ban list. The only thing with the ban list that made me sad for this deck was that Electromite didn't come back for some reason, and that Engaged came back as well, but I was at least happy for the additional Double Iris and Skullcrab Joker. Both of those make summoning this deck's boss monster a lot easier, and it's just been one of my favorite decks since Arc 5. Starting off with the monsters, play the one Time Gazer Magician, just so you can deck thin with Chronograph Sorcerer. Then I play 3 copies of Harmonizing Magician. Its pendulum ability doesn't really matter, but what does matter is that it's a scale 8. But its effect is when it's pendulum summoned, you can special summon one Pendulum Magician from your deck, but banish it when it leaves the field. Harmonizing cannot be pendulum summoned from the extra deck, which is fine because you have ways to get it back to your hand from the extra deck. Harmonizing is just a good extender for this deck. 3 Purple Poison. Purple Poison, Double Iris, and Black Fang Magician. They all have effects that work when they're destroyed, and their effects in scale destroy them. So you can have them in scale, their effects will destroy them, and then that triggers their monster effects. So Purple Poison's pendulum effect is if a dark spellcaster battles, you can have it gain 1200 attack and then destroy itself, which will trigger its monster effect, being able to let you target one face-up card on the field and destroy it. Then I play 2 copies of Double Iris Magician. Double Iris's pendulum effect is you can target one dark spellcaster you control, apply its effect, and then destroy it. Once applied, any battle damage that it deals, any battle damage is doubled to your opponent. And then when it's destroyed, you can add 1 Pendulum Graph card from your deck to your hand. Then I play 2 copies of White Wing Magician. This is only in here because it's a level 4 Pendulum Magician, and it's always traded as a Synchro Dragon. And Purple Poison is always treated as a Fusion Dragon. Double Ice is always treated as a Pendulum Dragon. And Black Fang Magician is always treated as a Xyz Dragon. But it has the effect of you can target one monster your opponent controls, have its attack, and it's destroyed. And when this card you control is destroyed, you can special summon one Dark Spellcaster from your graveyard. Then I play 1 copy of Performer Pal Skullcrab Joker. Skullcrab Joker has the... You never set it in the pendulum scale. Typically you're normal summoning it, because when this card is normal summoned, you can add a Performer Pal monster, Magician, Pendulum monster, or an Odd Eyes monster from your deck to your hand, except for another Skullcrab Joker. This card, if it was at 3, this deck would be amazing. And I'm really hoping that's where Konami is going with this. Then I play 3 copies of Supreme King Dragon Darkworm. You never scale it because you want to have a scale that's typically higher because you typically want to pendulum summon a certain level 6 monster. But its effect is if you control no monsters and it's in the graveyard, you can special summon it. And then when it's normal or special summoned, you can search for 1 Supreme King Gate monster. You can only use each effect once per turn. Then I play 3 copies of Chronograph Sorcerer. Chronograph Sorcerer has the effect of if it's in the pendulum scale, you can destroy it to place a Time Gazer from your deck and face up in your pendulum scale or in your monster zone. But it also has the effect of if a card you control is destroyed, you can special summon it from your hand and another monster. But the main effect I care for that it has is you can banish it, a Synchro Dragon, Fusion Dragon, Xyz Dragon, and Pendulum Dragon from your hand, field, or graveyard as cost to then fusion summon Supreme King Zarg. Then I play 1 copy of Oath Dragon Magician. You will never summon this, you only ever want it to be your low scale. Oath Dragon Magician has the effect of if you have a Magician in your other zone, or Pendulum zone, then you can take 1 face-up Pendulum Magician from your extra deck and add to your hand. And that is a Hard Nose per turn effect. Then I play the 1 Gate 0 just for the low scale Search of Darkworm. Then I play one copy of Supreme King Dragon Odd Eyes. Yeah, you never scale this because it's a scale 4, and that means you can only pendulums on 3 or lower, or 5 or higher. But it has the effect of, if your pendulum monster battles an opponent's monster, any battle damage inflicted to your opponent is doubled. During the battle facing tree, this card is special up to 2 Supreme King Dragon and or Supreme King Gate pendulum monsters react check in defense position except for Supreme King Dragon Odd Eyes. The only effect you ever use with it is the double any battle damage the pendulum monster does with a monster. That's the only ever effect you use with it, and I'm literally only using it because of how I like the Supreme King Dragons. And I just wish Konami would bring back Supreme King Dragon Starving Venom with some kind of effect change to where you can't FTK with it. Such as just changing its effect so that it can only target opponent's monsters. That's it for the monsters. Moving on to the spells. This first spell can be replaced with literally anything else you want. I'm just playing it because I feel like trying to be funny. And because I saw applications for it. I play one copy of Smile World. It does increase the attack of all monsters on the field that are currently on the field when it's activated by 100 for every monster in play. I just like it because of how you can combine that with other things and it actually gives you quite a boost. One Foolish Burial to dump Darkworm. One Monster Born to bring back monsters from my graveyard because you can summon a lot with this deck. One copy of Star Pendulum Graph. So this makes it so your opponent cannot target your spellcasters with spell cards or their effects. And if I face a Magician Pendulum monster you control leaves the monster zone or pendulum zone, you can add one Magician Pendulum monster from your deck to your hand. So it's a searcher that protects your spellcasters from being targeted by spells. And I play one copy of Pendulum Paradox. This just lets you take 2 Pendulum monsters with different names but the same scale from your face-up extra deck to your hand. So if you have Chronograph Sorcerer and Harmonizing Magician in your face-up extra deck, you can add them to your hand because they're both scale 8. Then I play 2 copies of Duelist Alliance. If you have a card in your Pendulum Zone, search for one card from your deck that lists Pendulum in its name. 2 copies of Dragon Shrine, also to dump Darkworms. And to finish off the spells, I play 3 Pendulum Call. You discard 1 card, search for 2 Pendulum Magician monsters with different names. Cards in your Pendulum Zones cannot be destroyed by card effects until the end of the next turn. And when you activate this effect, cards in your Pendulum... I just realized I was about to say the same thing twice. But this Pendulum Call happens to work great with the 3 copies of Time Pendulum Graph. Time Pendulum Graph just makes it so your spellcasters cannot be targeted by trap cards or their effects. And you can target 1 Pendulum Magician monster you control, and 1 card your opponent controls, destroy both. But if you're only able to destroy 1, you get to send 1 card on the field to the graveyard. And then to finish off the traps, I only play 1 copy of Supreme Rage. It can only be active if you control Supreme King Zark, but when you do, you destroy all monsters you control. And then you can summon as many Supreme King Dragon monsters from your hand, deck, graveyard, and extra deck as possible with different names. So I like this because you can attack with it, everything, activate it, and get 4 more attacks for no apparent reason. Also, you can banish it from your graveyard to take 2 Supreme King Dragon Darkworms that are in your graveyard and attach them to an Xyz monster you control as material. So it lets you summon Supreme King Dragon Dark Rebellion and then give it materials. That is it for the main deck. Moving on to the extra deck. I play 1 copy of Abyss Dweller. Abyss Dweller is only in this deck because of decks like Ogdoadic. If they get Dwellered, then they have 0 chance of being able to make plays that turn. Like, they can make a couple, but they won't be able to do their major things. Then I play 1 copy of Raiders Knight. This is only in here to summon Arc Rebellion. I'm going to play 2 copies of Time Star Magician. Time Star Magician it requires 2 level 4 Magician Pendulum monsters. But you can once per turn you can use one material to search for a Dark Spellcaster. And if a Magician Pendulum monster or if a pendulum monster on your field be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can send one Pendulum Magician from your deck to the graveyard instead. So I like it because you have this with more, like 3 Pendulum monsters. If your opponent activates Raigeki or Lightning Storm, then you can send a Pendulum Magician to the graveyard to save your 3 Pendulum monsters, but your Time Star will be destroyed. And Time Star can also protect the Pendulum Scales as well. Then I play 1 copy of Performer Mage Trapeze Magician. Trapeze Magician's only in here for decks that like to burn, like Mystic Mine. If I summon this, true I can't attack with it because of Mystic Mine, but they also can't burn me until the damage they would deal would be over 2,500. So it buys me a bit more time while I try to get past Mystic Mine. Then I play 1 copy of Supreme King Dragon Dark Rebellion. Dark Rebellion has the effect of when it battles, you can use 1 material to reduce the opposing monster's attack to 0. And then Dark Rebellion gains that monster's original attack points until the end of the turn. Or until the end of the battle, I mean. Then I play 1 copy of Arc Rebellion Xyz Dragon. I only play this because sometimes you just need a really big monster, and this can be that. Arc Rebellion just says you can use 1 material. It gains the attack of all other monsters on the field. But you can only attack with Arc Rebellion. I think it also has some other effect that restricts you. Oh, and it also negates the effect of all other monsters on the field. But you can still only attack with Arc Rebellion, which is perfectly fine. Because typically, the fun part is whenever I summon this, it's typically after my opponent has already used their Dragoon Negate. Which is actually kind of funny because Dragoon actually does not do as much to this deck as you would think, depending on your hand. Like, it's great against this deck if you start off with a bad hand, but if you have a decent hand, you should be fine. Then I play 1 copy of Supreme King Dragon Clearwing. Clearwing has the effect of when it's synchro summoned to destroy all face-up monsters your opponent controls. And if it battles a monster at the start of, or before the damage step, you can activate its effect to destroy the opposing monster and then burn your opponent for the attack points of that monster, or its original attack. You can use that effect of Supreme King Dragon Clearwing once per turn. Then I play 1 copy of Enlightenment Paladin. When Enlightenment Paladin is used using a Pendulum Magician monster, you can add 1 spell card from your graveyard back to your hand, so this is for spell recursion. And also the fact that if it destroys a monster in battle, your opponent takes damage equal to that monster's attack, so it's a decent card. Then I play 3 copies of Ignister Prominence, the Blasting Draco Slayer. This card coming back to 3 actually kind of surprised me. But its effect is you can target 1 Pendulum card or 1 Pendulum monster on your Monster Zone or Pendulum Zone. Destroy it, and if you do, shuffle 1 card your opponent controls back into the deck. So this is another way to out cards that can't be targeted or destroyed. Then I play 1 copy of Beals of the Diabolic Dragons, just because sometimes having a monster that can't be destroyed, that's easy to get to, or easier to get to than Zark, is actually good. And if you don't want to play Beals, just play a 2nd copy of Void Ogre Dragon. If you don't have a hand, it's a spell trap negate once per turn. And then to finish off the extra deck, the 1 copy of Supreme King Zark. Supreme King Zark cannot be special summoned except by being fusion summoned. When it is fusion summoned, destroy all cards your opponent controls. It cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects. If Zark destroys a monster in battle, then you can special summon 1 Supreme King Dragon from your deck, extra deck, hand, or graveyard, ignoring summoning conditions. And then if it's destroyed while in your Monster Zone, you can place in your Pendulum, face up in your Pendulum Zone. And then its Pendulum effect is negate the effects of Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, and Pendulum monsters, or Fusion, Synchro, and Xyz monsters your opponent controls. That never comes up. Usually the effect that comes up with Zark is its effect destroy monsters. Or summon your more Supreme King dragons. But it's just because of that sheer power that's why I like Zark so much. Anyway, that is it for my Zark deck profile. If you have any ideas what I can do to improve the deck, or have ideas of decks you'd like me to make, or just match decks you'd like to see face each other, feel free to comment below. Thanks for watching.